as the Rangers Journal night.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Rangers Journal podcast. Hot for the press on follow the night. Steven Gerrard's been spotted in Carmarthenshire for 3 days in a row, and he's now been spotted in Bahrain going on to the Esplanade in Greenock. I want to wish you all a very warm welcome to the Rangers Journal. My name's Scotty, I am your host for this evening, and I'm delighted to be joined by my panel who are going to help us speak through the talent in the league this season now, if there is any. I think we've snaffled it all already, but we're going to look at the league and compare it to other title-winning teams, because you get that old phrase where we need to buy the best talent in the league to win the league. And I don't think the talent's there to win the league within the league, if that makes any sense. But first, Stevie, I'm going to come to you first. How are you doing, mate?
Evening, mate. Evening, everybody. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Hanging together, pal. Hanging together. And to my bottom left is Billy. Billy, how are you doing, mate?
Good. Just loaded up in Jaffa cake, so I'm ready to go.
Happy days. And my brother for another mother, Dino, how you doing, pal?
I'm good, thank you, buddy. Good to see you all.
Where are you this week, Dean?
Airdrie.
You may not be Dylan for a wee beer and a wee Gerrard Hayton session, aye? Jesus, that group chat's been mental this week. Anyway, we're here to talk about SPFL talent now. Stevie, within the last obviously we signed Connor Barron on a pre-contract last year, we got him. Signed Lyle Cameron on a free contract this season. Is there anybody within the league out with Lawrence Shankland? Say that's the obvious one, right? That's the one that's going to come up on the pod quite frequently tonight. Yeah. But we need to relate it back to past signings and if the talent within the league is good enough to be able to win the league for you this season. So is there anybody else that kind of springs to mind to you that you would like to see, or are you quite happy with the way Rangers are doing business?
No, I would definitely like to see a couple more young Scots added. I know everybody says Lennon Muller, but to be honest, I'd prioritise Bailey Rice. I'd further see him keep developing, getting more game time. To me, I would like to see that. But one guy that kind of stands out to me is Kieran Bowie at Hibs. I think he's got something about him. I think he's a real talent, and I think he's going to get a lot better. I think he would cost a fair bit to get him, but obviously depending on the takeover and the new manager, might look at Rangers. I think that's an exciting move, European football progression. I just think he's a bit of a special player. So yeah, I wouldn't mind Kieran Bowie for Hibs.
Just Ryan Nugent, one of our fellow hosts, has come in that we are officially at 3,000 YouTube subs. So thank you everybody for your support. That's a milestone that we have reached a lot quicker than I thought we were going to reach it. I thought we were going to reach maybe 2 years before we hit 3,000 subs, but here we are, kind of just 14, 15 months in, and that's the levels we're making into the YouTube streaming. So, Billy, see, in terms of previous Rangers teams with a Scottish appetite or an SPFL appetite, I'm looking at Walter's teams and I'm looking at Lee McCulloch, Stephen Naismith, Chris Boyd, all these kind of guys that have been down south, and we've plucked them for various clubs. And I'm thinking now, if a guy like Walter was in charge and he was looking at the market within Scotland, would there be anybody you think he would sign?
I mean, it's one of those questions. It's such a different time. Like the last 10 years, like it or not, shifted the landscape. Like a lot of players that might have considered Rangers or Celtic, like it or not, if you don't have a club affiliation, you're probably going to want to go to Celtic because it looks like it's the safest bet and the safest move. You've also had the change that the good player, like Stephen Naismith now, does he stay in Scotland long enough, or does like the English system of like hoovering up young talent have him down before we ever get anywhere near him? So I think there's a weird thing. I was thinking about this as a subject. It's like, I don't think we have access to the tranche of talent that we had during Walter's period. I think that the top tranche of Scottish youth talent just gets hoovered up, especially what's happened post-Brexit, where like English clubs are finding it more difficult to hoover up foreign talent so that they're looking north of the border. And it's difficult because like I get the argument that Rangers teams have been successful with a Scottish identity. I mean, how much of an identity that is a question. But you're not talking about getting your Naismiths and your McCullochs, people who are either coming through or have got an affiliation with the club and, like Beaton Motherwell got a bit of money and experience down south and now want to kind of like have a career at Rangers because they're Rangers men. I'm just not sure that the same pool of either talent or ambitions out there. I mean, look at Billy Gilmore. Like, he went and people talk about him coming back this summer. There's no chance he's going to want to come back to Scotland. So I think you were looking at likes of Josh Mulligan and people, who can do a job in midfield or do a job at right back, and understand you need players like that who will get you through a season. But I've got to be honest, I don't think, maybe if Walter was here, he could work his magic. I just don't think Rangers have access to the very best Scottish talent now. I think it's gone before we get it, and we're left trying to develop the second best or the third best tranche. I know that's a bit depressing, but I think it's the reality.
No, I completely agree with you. To be honest with you, Billy, I think that the Naismiths and the Boyds and the Thompsons, Whitakers, Scott Browns, Gary O'Connors, Derek Riordans, I don't think there's a club in Scotland producing talents like that anymore. And I think the main one this summer, if Rangers are to look at a transfer target list within a league now, with the takeover pending, I would say that Lennon Miller is a viable option for Rangers, whereas this time last summer, we couldn't afford the fee. So, Dean, I'm going to come to you. Is there anybody that's kind of stood out to you, or do you think Rangers are ultimately doing their best in a bad market?
No, I don't think we're doing our best in terms of players. I think that we could have signed the last few years. Like Billy had said, players that can come in and be the squad players, like Josh Mulligan. We've not been making the astute signings in that aspect, as far as I'm concerned. But we're faced with a reality that Billy just said, that the country lacks the infrastructure and the foundations to be able to consistently produce players, because there's no reserve league as well, and because there's such a gap between the B team, the disbanded B team, and our first team as well. It does make things a bit harder and a lot less attractive for players of a young age to come to Rangers. I mean, if I was a dad with a teenage son, I wouldn't be recommending him to sign for Rangers. To be quite honest with you, it would be St Johnstone, Kilmarnock, a team of that ilk that he can go and actually get games, get his apprenticeship, and then go into pastures new, like the young guys that are now no longer in Scotland, like that Aaron Hickey. You know what I mean? He left quite young, didn't he? Just to use him as an example, and he's having a good career at the moment. Billy Gilmore left. We were all gutted that he was leaving, and it was dubbed the next Barry Ferguson. And I'll tell you what, man, he can play as good as Barry Ferguson. I think he's a fantastic player. I really do.
Better than Barry Ferguson. Better player.
Can I come back on that?
But the point I'm making is, we've got no chance in hell to be able to keep a hold of these players. And 15, 20 years ago when Walter came in, well, 18 years ago now, isn't it? Things have completely different. I mean, that production of Hibs players that you just rattled through, I mean, that's once in a sort of every so often type of thing that happens. I think that amount of players in one team, especially how good they all actually were for Hibs, but the infrastructure in the country just isn't there, is my point.
But Dean, see, to be honest with you, if I can come back at you on that, I mean, you look at when we've all seen Helicopter Sunday, right? Like, we've all watched that video for the Rangers YouTube stream today. If you've not watched it, head on over and watch it. If it doesn't shed a tear, it will certainly put a big smile on your counting. But remember, at least Stephen Thompson. Stephen Thompson got an exchange deal with Billy Dodds. Billy Dodds went to Dundee United. Stephen Thompson came to Rangers for 400-500k. David Thompson was one of 4 that scored 15 goals per season for Rangers. Like, players of that ilk that came in, knew the league, done the job. Big Marv, for example, big stalwart centre back. You could probably rhyme off a full team of them, let's be honest. So, is it that Rangers just aren't looking for it, or is it that it's just not there? To me, it's simply not there to look for.
I think it's a bit of column A and a bit of column B. Like, Rangers are obviously, what we've been through and everything, we're diminished in our powers, but that is about to change with the takeover. So, depending on what happens, we might become far more appealing. But you're all right there about the kind of huge shift in the landscape, like guys like Lewis Ferguson, Aaron Hickey, they're all moving abroad. 20 years ago, that never happened. They've got a pathway now to go and play in Serie A and win things. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? Do you know what I mean? So it's a totally different game. But I don't think we can predict how much change is going to happen with the new ownerships until it happens. And then that might kind of start swinging back towards us, getting the best young players. So it's quite an exciting time.
Aye, it's a bit of a weird one. Billy, see the boy Penrice at Hearts, left back now. I've been far from impressed with our left backs this season. Do you think, have you seen enough of him to tell you that he's better than Jeffy or Ridvan?
I'll be honest, I haven't watched that much of Hearts this season, and I'm still going to say yes. I think it would probably be an improvement on Jeffy and Ridvan. Ridvan he's got that one wonder goal, but he's just he'll play 2 good games and then 4 bad ones, or he's never fit. You just can't rely on him. And Jeffy, I don't know what happened to Jeffy. He came in and he looked like one of those signings we'd gotten in the summer, like Igaman or Nsiala, who actually we were developing. Then he just seemed to stall and go back the way. He came in, he was looking quite assured. He wasn't afraid to take on a shot. He was putting in decent crosses. And then it just I don't know if I maybe been a bit unfair on him, because although he looks like a sort of like 40-year-old kind of like Mexican cartel member, he is actually only in his early 20s. So I always forget he's a young player. And what I would say is, like, I wouldn't be averse to keeping him about for another year, because he came in and he showed promise and he went off a cliff in a pretty patchy team. So there is the possibility that in a second season he develops consistency and he does more of the good stuff. Ridvan, though, you just, like, if all these stories about they genuinely want to take him back to Turkey and give us our money back, then what are we waiting for? Because no harm at the guy. All the managers say he's a warrior, but if you're a warrior but sort of made out of plasticine and you're never available, it's not actually much use to us. Penrice, I've only seen bits and pieces. As a backup, I still think as a first team left back, in my daydreams, I imagine us getting a loan deal for Nathan Patterson in the sort of style of what they're doing with the man with no hamstrings over at Celtic. I'm not sure that's realistic. And this is actually, I think this is where it will be interesting to see what Thelwell's got lined up and what the 49ers are thinking about, because you can almost, fullbacks are so important in the modern game, and actually getting decent fullbacks to come to Scotland is a lot easier than getting like an international class striker or a midfielder. You should actually be able to do a decent job. So Penrice I would look at as a backup. I'm not sure I would have him coming in as first choice. I don't think we're winning the league with him as first choice. Just to touch on a couple of things that come up there, though, it's quite sobering to hear the man in the Rangers top on the Rangers podcast going, "I'm not sure I'd have my son joining Rangers," which I think is honest. I think is honest, and I totally get where you're coming from, but kind of shows, because you're talking about players moving abroad. It's not just that Lewis Ferguson and Aaron Hickey moved abroad; they've moved abroad and thrived, which I don't think anybody. I mean, I never saw Lewis Ferguson going and doing what he's done, and I think if you're now, it's kind of the role of a good example. If you're a young player in Scotland now, 20 years ago you'd have gone out to Italy. Who does that? And there's no examples of anyone making a success out with your Souness's and your Laws. Now you're looking at Aaron Hickey and Lewis Ferguson and players like that, and you're thinking, well, if they can do it, like I can do it. Yeah, so to answer your question, Penrice is a backup, but I think we need better to win the league to be up to challenge for the league.
Aye, it's interesting, very interesting. But going off topic a wee minute, Stevie, just like Billy had a wee pick at Dean there about saying that Dean would tell his Bern to go elsewhere for first team football, and then potentially further down the line we look at Rangers. It's the exact same advice I would give my kid. What's your take on it, Stevie?
Well, firstly, I would like to say Dean might have a 13-year-old kid. You never know, do you know? Sorry. Nah, I mean, I do appreciate that. It's like, you know, the way we've been and whatever, we've not had a lot of success, bar 55 in the two cups. But, you know, even in this season, it's been pretty poor. At least Billy Rice has had a wee bit of game time. I would have far preferred to see him getting more youngsters in there. Barry first in the last 3 games, that never happened. Somebody said that in the comments there. But there's still got to be a fair amount of prestige to play with Rangers. If it was my kids, I'd still want to play for Rangers, absolutely, 100%. Even despite the seismic shift in like Scottish players going abroad and whatnot, and that potential success, like right now, what's about to happen. I firmly believe that, you know, you do look, like you mentioned previous squads there, like even like random signings would get like Alec Cleland or whoever, you know, they would come in and they would improve so much just by being part of Rangers, but ultimately they had that quality, you know, they had the great foreign players already there. So for me, this summer's about adding real quality from abroad, but I'd still like to see maybe 4 or 5 Scottish players for like who know the league coming into Ibrox, because you need that to kind of supplement what you've already got. I think there's it's a delicate mix, like a really fine balance, but if you get it right, I think that's what we want to see, just having that Scottish identity, but ultimately it's the quality. It has to be there.
Well, in fact, let's talk about a wee bit about Scots abroad then, right? Like, in the MLS, you've got Lewis Morgan, formerly of Celtic, and you've got Ryan Gauld in MLS, steady performers. Taking the sting out the bite with Lewis Morgan. Billy, I'll come to you on this. I don't know if you know much about Lewis Morgan, but he stayed near me while I was growing up, so I know fine well he's a Rangers man. But in terms of ability, would you be against going to players that have previously played in the league that might have the quality enhanced Rangers?
I mean, I've got to be honest, I'm quite old school in terms of signing like former Celtic players. I just, no. It's like, you know, no, if you can avoid it. You're killing me here. If I didn't know what Penrice was doing at Hearts, I'm definitely not on top of what Lewis Morgan's doing in MLS.
I think he's at Red Bull or something, New York Red Bull or one of them teams.
I mean, I'll be honest and say it's a trajectory that makes me less excited, because, you know, like you look at like, you know, the likes of Scott Arfield, like he almost shows you the levels. He played top level in England, then he came to kind of like live the dream playing at Rangers. Then was it Portland Timbers or somebody went to? So like he eventually, and then he's come back. So you can almost look, there's a step change in terms of like he is a good pro. And he's shown you what level he can play at. He could play at that level, then he's come down a level. So I would be more excited about signing a player who's on the up in the MLS rather than someone who is a mature player. No harm to Ryan Gauld. That guy's had an interesting career. But I think if he was going to be what we needed, someone would have identified it by now. And it's not to say there aren't some good players in the MLS. I just wonder, you've got so many multi-club ownership models now that if someone was a good MLS option, do we get them? Or again, are we into that thing where we're in the second or third tranche? Because like I'm trying to remember the couple of Americans that came over and we signed, like, was it the right back, and he played like 2 games. And his wife was more famous than he was. The name's escaping me at the moment, but like, you know, that sort of model of, he was an athlete and he was the next big thing. and apparently Celtic were in for him. We got him and nothing. So yeah, it's possible we could get a gem coming in from MLS, but I just feel like if there's a really good MLS player, I think for me the top level players there are maybe going to go. Bundesliga seems quite a common route, or France, where they can try and build up a wee bit of a CV to then get to one of the very big money leagues. I mean, it's, as we're talking about this, it's kind of depressing in some ways, because the reality is we are like this massive club with massive following, but we're in this sort of like weird little league, and we don't have the TV money. You know, like any player would want to run out at Ibrox in front of 50,000 fans and play in front of that atmosphere. But at the end of the day, if you didn't sort of grow up a Rangers supporter, you've got family to look after, you've got parents to pay back for years of supporting you, you've got kids to worry about down the line. And if you can make your money in, you know, football's a short career, you can get an injury any time. So if you get one big contract down south and that's you set, you're going to take it. You know, I would be the same. For me, Rangers, playing for Rangers, or like, you know, having a kid playing for Rangers is the dream. But I think that's less and less these days for some kids, because you know, people are more materialistic, and also there is that thing of it costs a lot. Like when I grew up, you thought, oh God, I'm going down a rabbit hole here. When I grew up, you were like you just walked around till you found a game in a public park. Now families are having to spend thousands to get their kids into football academies where they probably kick a ball in anger like 20 times in a week, and it's costing them a lot of money. So somehow I've moved from MLS to like the cost of living crisis.
It's all part of it. It's all part of it.
But no, I mean, like I'm like Lewis Morgan wouldn't excite me, to be honest. When he came into the Scotland squad, I didn't think he looked great. He just looked like a place filler to me, you know. Like, and that's a chance to maybe shine a wee bit when you're back in the spotlight. Ryan Gold, not so much either. It's one of the things I'm really excited and fascinated about this season, is to see what Thelwell's got lined up. You know, I'm kind of hoping it's going to be big units from. Sorry, it's kind of going into the sort of like Steven Gerrard version 1 time, where we get big athletic units from down south who can be developed. You know, Joe Aribos and Calvin Bassey's guys who've got athleticism and skill and potential, and Ibrox almost becomes like a hothouse for them. You know, somewhere where they will either, you know, be done inside a season, or they will really flourish, and a £1.5 million player becomes a £30 million player. And I think there's a better chance that they're well finding that down south, to be honest, than in America.
Fair. That's fair too. So, gents, what I want you to start thinking about, get your cogs turning in your head, is previous title winning teams, right? Not recently. Think back a wee bit and think like the ingredients that were in those teams. So I'm on transfer market now, and I'm looking at the late great Walter Smith's signings across his managerial career. And Stevie, I'm going to come to you on it, and I'm going to go Andy Gorham for Hibs, Alan McLaren for Hearts, Gordon Jury for Tottenham, James Beattie for Stoke, Gordon Petric for Dundee United, Stally Stensas for Rosenborg, right? So there's 4 or 5 players there that he's signed. Daniel Kuzan's the one next on the list now. That's page 2. That guy made an awful lot of signings. He spent an awful lot of Rangers money, I need to say. But they've all come in and been part of a successful Rangers team. They've all made up the ingredients in their own way. Now, when you walk into a dressing room, and we've all heard about it in the row stories, you win together, you drink together, and then the Big Eck era, where he came in and they lifted the Dick Advocaat team to doubles and trebles. So, what do you think in this day and age Rangers need to do? Do they need to stay within home? Need to stay home in terms of their signings, or do they need to? Is it a bit of both? What's the right mix? Dean, I'll come to you after Stevie.
I think, those first 3 names you said, they're Gorham, Jukebox, and McLaren. They're just like absolutely solid. You could probably put those 3 guys out on their own and they'd win a game of football for you. They were just getting their real quality. I mean, phenomenal quality actually.
Alan McLaren was ridiculous, man.
He was just a unit. I mean, just
Aye.
a great. Remember? Well, maybe didn't remember, but I remember his Scotland game where he basically man-marked Baggio out the
Right.
game at Ibrox. It was a Scotland game. I don't know what it was at Ibrox, but it was at Ibrox, and Baggio never got a kick. Alan McLaren just sat on him for 90 minutes. He never got a look in. I think he was still at Hearts at that point. But I mean, it kind of proves your point about the quality not being as good in Scotland, because you look at those three guys. I know Gorham obviously started off in England, and Jukebox was at Spurs when we signed him. It's a totally random point, but I liked it when there was no transfer windows. Like Rangers could go out and buy a Gordon Jury mid-season when we were struggling. Do you know what I mean? It was like a really brilliant.
Andy Dibble.
Yeah, Andy Dibble. What a legend. Forget about him.
Bring Mark Gately back for a game or two and let him get sent off.
But even guys like Petric, he wasn't the greatest player, but he knew the league. You know what I mean? And he had bite.
Yeah.
Like most of those guys you've named, they've all got like real metal and bite. You know, that they'll go into like a battle and they'll come out on the other side of it. You know what I mean? And that's what Rangers have really missed for a long time.
That's a
So that's really what you want. You want guys who, you know, they're going to like fill the jersey. They're not going to shrink fit. And that's what Rangers need. Scottish or foreign, need guys to come in and really just, you know, take it with the scruff of the neck and want to beat Ibrox, because when Ibrox is rocking, there's no better place. So we need guys with actual, you know, scared of taking responsibility and want a challenge.
Fair. Dean, I'm going to come to you with the next 6 on the list, right? So it's Daniel Kuzan, Stuart McCall, Davy Robertson, Andres Velichka, Dale Gordon for Norwich. He might have went to Everton, I don't know. And DeMarcus Beasley. So is that players that, you know, Velichka scored in the title run in? I remember he scored against Hearts to put us 2-1 up, we're 1-0 down. Is this not what we need to get back to, or is it just a case of... I personally don't think that pool of players is there anymore for Rangers to go and invest in. What do you think? You're on mute.
I do. They were absolute gems. They really were. Even, and I could be wrong, but I think maybe like DeMarcus Beasley was he like even a free transfer or something ridiculous.
He was
even
signed
like
to PSV for 1.2 million.
Wasn't he much, aye. And the same
800,000.
Kuzan wasn't much either. Robertson wasn't much. McCall wasn't much. Do you know what I mean? These players weren't actually all that, but the value that they brought to the team was incredible in terms of their ability, but also their personalities, the impact they had on the pitch. You know, Davy Robertson, honestly, man, I can't folks say that Newman's the best left back, and Davy Robertson's to me just was just
a close first or second, didn't he?
Oh, aye, he was an absolute animal, wasn't he? And
Great.
McCall just, you know, like he bossed every game he was playing. He bossed the midfield. Do you know, like Kuzan, he was just an incredible ability. Like the
mind when he punched McManus twice at Parkhead on the route to score. Tremendous.
Do you know? I can imagine that players doing that these days. You know, so in terms of ability, maybe not, but I do believe that there is James out there. I do honestly think that. But it's finding them that's obviously a lot harder than it was finding them way back when. You know, like, aye, Kuzan was just yin that went pretty much unknown in the grand scheme of things, out with the sort of.
Aye.
Do you know what I mean? It comes to I was like, where's this guy been forever? So I mean, it was phenomenal. Aye, so I think it's just going to be a hard task, but getting players of that mentality is what's is badly needed.
Do you think them guys came in with the mentality, or do you think the management put that mentality into them by the route they were coming into?
I remember David Robertson at Aberdeen. He was like that at Aberdeen.
Was he?
You know,
Right, okay.
Aye. Stuart McCall, I listened to a podcast he did a few years ago, and he was like, like that coming in. He fitted the project at Rangers. He fitted the team, so I mean, DeMarcus Beasley is as little as he was in physical stature, but his presence in the team, the lift that he gave everybody when he was on form, it was like, what's he doing at Rangers sometimes, wasn't it?
Aye.
So that, like things like that, like Smith, I obviously, like every manager, didn't get every signing right, but the ones that he did get right were just like absolute just strokes of genius. They really
were all leaders as well, eh? They were leaders,
exactly,
captains.
exactly.
Like all the Scottish guys you mentioned there, they could all have been like captain any given day.
Yep, I was getting to that. That was no, you're fine. No, but you're bang on, and I think that lack of leadership is so apparent because of these players that we're talking about. Were all leaders. They were all, like as Stevie says, you could give any one of them the armband, and we still would have been a successful side. And that's just something it's in my opinion, a reality that could have happened back then, but now you would think, wait there, if Tav's going off, who do we give the armband to? Do you know what I mean? It's not like, well, it doesn't matter, we could give it to him, or we could give it to him, or we could give it to him. It's like you're actually thinking, who's actually the next best person to take on that mantle of being captain?
Aye.
Can I make a really quick point? Sorry.
Of course you can.
Just, you said about the reserve football before. All those players came through when like football was entirely different. There was no academies. It was reserve football, and it was so hard. It was so physical. It was so tough. And I think that bred that kind of mentality, whereas the reserve football's not there now. And I think that's a big part of how players have changed in the last 20 years. Sorry, I was going in my head that together.
No, that's fair. Billy, I'm going to come to you with the last kind of 5 or 6 players, and then you can kind of round off on what the boys have said in terms of winning mentality, that squad building needed within Rangers, past tense and present, if potentially catch Celtic and win the league. So the next 6 players I've got for you: Neil Alexander, Vladimir Weiss, Derek McInnes, Andy Webster, Mark Catley and Davy Weir. Now the last 2 are obviously very they stand out as they're big, massive presences, big personalities in the dressing room. But in terms of the first 4, if we were to sign somebody of that ilk today, would that not kind of raise questions? Like Curry's brought up a good point as well before you start speaking in terms of all the players didn't have egos, they just got on with their job. Do you think that's a big part of it as well?
So you're breaking up a wee bit there. I don't know if that was just with me, but I did catch the point when you're asking about whether the first 4 players would raise questions if we signed them today. I think that speaks to a couple of things. Like one, Walter Smith, because like Walter Smith, just improved players like, Neil Alexander. Neil Alexander, to me, very underrated keeper. Possibly the last time we've had a second choice keeper who was a genuine first team keeper, and doesn't really get the credit. Weiss, I mean, one of the longest running sagas in football is Weiss coming back to Rangers. Like how often did we hear that? And he'll always have a special place in our hearts because of that quick free kick, and also just how much he loved getting it up them, which you cannot fake. You could tell that was like he immediately got it in Nacho Novo style. He took one look at that lot and went, nah. So I think it says a lot for Watty that you're talking about Weiss. McInnes did a job. Not the world's greatest player, but again, kind of speaks to that. We had, like we've been talking about, we had a team of real characters, leaders, winners, and you could bring in average players and they would get dragged up. That's what happens. Good players play with better players, they get better. And I think you saw that with the likes of McInnes and maybe even Weiss. Webster, I mean, the less said about Webster, the better. I mean, I think the general consensus is, like, as much as injuries played a part, there might have been a mentality issue there in terms of, like, just not fancying it. But looking at that, I mean, the two things I think looking at the list of players is, one, the difference and this really taps into where I had concerns about, like, Ancelotti coming in, is like Rangers successfully, whether this is the way forward or not, I'm not saying it is, but historically when we're successful, it's with managers who are figureheads, who are leaders, who can literally galvanise a dressing room and get players to play above themselves. And Gerrard did that. Gerrard wasn't a manager, but Gerrard carried teams to cups, and people looked at him and went, yeah, he's walked the walk. Now, whether that's the way going forward, we'll see what the 49ers have lined up. But I think it sort of touches on something that Dino was talking about as well, and actually Stevie too. It's just, like, we're talking about who gets the captaincy. We're talking about a team of leaders. And I think there's a couple of elements here. And I think the biggest one is, I'm just not sure that football, as it's currently played, and society in general, produces these players anymore. We're for better... So it's for better and worse, we're a gentler society than we used to be. People are less confrontational. Youngsters are more likely to be playing, on the Xbox, as you would say in still game, or kind of on their phones and stuff. So you go back to the reserve team league that Stevie was talking about, and it's not often I like to sort of like quote Gordon Strachan, but he did, like a number of years ago, he talked you through the path that a player would have had in his day versus now. And a player in his day was playing for, like, school team, local team, another team. They were training 3 times a week, and they were playing games 3 times a week. And then you take a talented player now, and they get put into the sort of like the academy system. They spend 3 hours going or they used to spend 3 hours going, on a bus up to Aberdeen, sitting on the bench, coming on for 15 minutes, touching the ball 6 times. Who gets, you don't. As a violinist, you don't get better playing 5 minutes a day. You get better standing in front of people playing. So I don't think our system produces, like, the kind of leadership and the kind of and I wonder, when you look at, like, say, Scotty Arfield, was that almost like a cut-off point for the last of that type of player? People who were, he was galvanised by very tragic events at Falkirk, but in a lot of ways, it was the making of him. Clearly, he had the character, but, he didn't. He let that inspire him. Like the sort of tragic events there. And I just think we're a softer society. I just think we don't produce that sort of confrontational, and it's not allowed. If you're a manager now who gets a player by the throat, you'll have HR involved. Like, and when you look around the world, the way I kind of look at it is, like, even if we can blame a lot of things in Scotland being an impoverished league because of the crap deals that Doncaster and the Celtic placemen get, then you can say, okay, we don't have a lot of money, but you can only blame that so much. I look around the world at the top teams, and even they don't. Your Vieiras and your Keanes and your guys that you would say he'll drag the team up. It's more a team game now, and it is. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure. Even if that guy exists, we can afford him. We might be able to develop him. If you had Barry Ferguson coming through now, he's still going to be Barry Ferguson. But a guy like that's almost like a freak of nature in some ways. When I look at that list of players, I think very fondly of Watty and what he could bring out of a human being. I try not to think of Andy Webster, and I think that the other ones, the fact that we've got fond memories of all of them says a lot about Walter Smith. And I think if you get like for like players, like the guy who would have been Derek McInnes now, I don't think he's maybe got the same confidence or personality or brashness that gets him in the team and like gets some medals. And I know I sound like an old man sort of shouting at clouds here, but I think these are facts. We find it frustrating because we look at the team and we would It's funny when you were saying about watching the Helicopter Sunday documentary and saying you shed a tear. I was watching it and it made me want to run around removing supporting walls for no reason, just because you were kind of like, just like adrenalised. And that's what we feel like as fans. But I'm just not sure your average modern football player's got that sort of passion.
100%, Billy. Everything you've said is absolutely spot on here. Stevie, you want to come in on and Billy said?
I totally 110% agree. It's almost like, I don't know about yourselves, but I didn't get like centre backs anymore. You don't get like your old fashioned, like, even like guys like Ryan Shaw across England, you don't get them.
Look at your centre backs to begin with.
Aye. It's a bit like, I don't know, academy players are all very much kind of like samey, a bit like Netflix shows, they're very bland. And you mentioned there, Billy, about like Derek McInnes. He was a backup midfielder. It was like you had guys like Gaza, Ian Ferguson, Stuart McCall, and then you had guys like Derek McInnes and a young Barry Ferguson. I mean, how's that for an environment to learn? I mean, that's real quality, but also like real hard men. So you've not got a choice, like you said, like having that brashness, having that like arrogance to succeed. And I don't think that's there.
Stevie, I'm going to stay with you now. We've spoke about kind of talents within the league. Glennon Miller, James Penrice, Lyle Cameron, Conor Barron, used them as an example. We've looked at past players who have been there and done it, and whether the talent's there. But I think we all agree the talent's not there within the SPFL anymore. But in terms of going forward, right, it appears to be we're down to two men in terms of Steven Gerrard and David Ancelotti. Now, my expectation is with this takeover, I'm speaking to Mark Mayoko, and the money that we're going to have behind us, that we need to compete at least for this title next season. See, when I say that, I want it to go to the last day and it to be done in goal difference that we lose it. No 5 points, 4 points, 3 points. I want it to go to the wire. Now, see, out of they two guys, what's the ingredients we need to make up with the money in the... I don't know, the knowledge needed within the club. So my question is, who do you want and what do we need?
That's a tough one.
Probably two hardest questions I've ever got asked in a podcast.
They're tough ones. I mean, I guess a week ago I was really keen for Ancelotti. I like the idea that somebody coming in with a completely clean slate, fresh ideas. He's still a big name. We talked about Gerrard like being at the side of the training pitch and raising the standard. I thought Ancelotti would be the same. And also he's maybe more like a modern coach. He is a better coach than Gerrard. Gerrard relies on somebody like beside him who's really good. A bit like Souness and Walter Smith. Souness was a great leader. I think Gerrard's a great leader, but he's not a great coach. Walter Smith was beside Souness and he had the knowledge. So if Gerrard is Gerrard, he's going to have a phenomenal number two and staff. So I'd probably still slightly favour Ancelotti just for a new set of ideas, but obviously he doesn't know the league and Gerrard does know the league, so that's a really difficult one to answer, to be honest. But
so can I just come in quickly with you on that, Stevie? So Ancelotti comes in, he signs a couple of foreign centre halves who are like Carol Svensson and Sasa Papac to begin with. Gerrard comes in and he buys Katic and Cameron Burgess, for example. Now, I'm throwing snowballs at you here, mate, right? And I'm expecting you. I'm expecting you to answer them, but would you not prefer somebody with a bit of experience within the league that knows what's needed to get to that level?
Yeah, that's the pragmatism. Absolutely. Gerrard is the more pragmatic appointment. You're absolutely spot on. And I don't know, but I think we need about a dozen players, and it's going to be a mix of those decent like foreigners. Like Katic's a good example. He was great for the time, because he came in, he was a big old unit, no scared to get stuck in. He was a decent player. He was exactly what we needed at that time. But I think it's all going to be about the quality and how much we're going to spend. Like, obviously, I've watched your interview with the boy, the finance expert, and I think they are going to put a fair bit in. But ultimately, you look at the 49ers, I kind of followed them a wee bit. They've just re-signed their quarterback. Like, they're one of their players, they signed a $250 million contract. They're huge. I mean, I'm not expecting that, but you know what I mean? It's like they're in a different stratosphere.
Aye.
And we're involved in that now. So, they're not coming to just make up the numbers. They want that Champions League money as soon as possible. And ultimately, I think there's going to be a European Super League, which is their aim. I'm sure that's what's at the
100%.
forefront of them. So, yeah, to answer your question, it's got to be a mix of real quality from abroad and the best. I want to see more goals from midfield. I think Cameron's a great signing because something we've really lacked is goals from the middle of the park.
I think it's like 9 goals, 3 assists or something this season. It's some stupid
That's
Latin.
terrible. It's just it's no good enough. So that has to get
No,
remedied.
but that's Lyle Cameron's record. That's
Oh, sorry, I think you're talking about Rangers combined. Oh no, that's good. That's really good. He's young, and he's I kind of think he's going to have that arrogance. Hopefully, going to take it with the scruff. But yeah, a lot. I think about a dozen signings at least. Huge turnover. But yeah, a mix of Scots and decent quality foreign players.
Billy, what about you? Who do you want? I was perfect, like kind of in my head. I was wanting a Muscat or a Knutson, or I was wanting a real ambitious appointment right now. But we've got who we've got. We've got David Ancelotti. We've got Steven Gerrard. I'm expecting a close title challenge next season at least, because of what we've got coming in the utter dross we've had to watch this season. I think it's the least that we're due is a wee bit of domestic success now. Who's got maybe a chance of bringing some success to you? What's your expectations for next season?
Well, it's interesting. Like Steven Gerrard is kind of like when we realised we were going down the 49ers route and we're going to be getting a new manager, etc. Gerrard was in the mix. I wasn't excited at the thought of Gerrard coming back because it doesn't always work the second time. It did with Walter, but Walter's got a statue for a reason. First time round he had Beale, and Beale's not coming back because good luck if they try to bring him back.
He's still in Saudi. Still in Saudi.
Good, because he's just tarnished. It's like so I don't see any place for him coming back. So like Stevie was saying, I think a lot of it depends almost like who would be the backroom staff. If the 49ers are expecting to appoint the backroom staff, that immediately for me would set alarm bells ringing, because Gerrard, when he came first time round, he had a plan. By God, did he have a plan? And that plan was to be Liverpool manager, and he had put a team together that he was going to come through from like what he was doing at Liverpool to Rangers, and then he thought he was going to bounce into Aston Villa and get maybe the final step there. He hit a ceiling. He kind of was found wanting in a lot of regards in the EPL. So I've got concerns about Gerrard. A lot of them is like, will he have that chemistry? Will he have a say in who he's working with? Will he have the same remit he had before? Because when he came in before, he was the man. King was enamoured with him. We were enamoured with him. The board were. And he got a lot of leeway. I'm not sure he would have anything like that with the 49ers. So has he matured and developed enough that he can work in those parameters? Not sure. I still think he's a better bet than Ancelotti, just because Ancelotti's so unknown that people can talk about, he might, in 5 years' time, we might be going, oh, we almost got Ancelotti. Can you imagine? Look what he's done in the game. But he's never been the man. He's never been the leader, the figurehead, the pressure that goes with that, the stress that goes with that. How many, happened to Beale? He went from being like the number 2. He came in with a plan, and as soon as it wasn't working, you saw the pressure. He started making bad decisions. He junked his whole idea. He didn't have the experience to fall back on that like a Walter Smith had. And that just gives me the fear about Ancelotti, because it just means it's a much bigger risk. Can he do what he was doing at Real Madrid? At Rangers? Maybe. Can he do it when the buck stops with him? That's added pressure. And the other factor that I'd sort of touched on in one of the other pods is his skill set might be very good, but currently his experience is fine-tuning elite level players, guys who are close to the finished article, the F1 cars of football. And at Rangers, the remit's going to be different. The remit's going to be getting your likes, your Joe Rebos and your Calvin Bassies and developing them. So taking them closer steps to being a top level player, and also squeezing the best out of like seasoned SPFL level pros. The best will in the world. How many of our squad would get into Real Madrid or a Bayern Munich squad? I'm not sure about that. So I kind of like you, Scotty, I was kind of Muscat would have been quite an interesting appointment. I'd have quite fancied that. I wasn't so keen on Knutson just because he's stuck at the one club for so long and seems comfortable there and does a great job. Muscat, he'd won leagues in different countries. He's got that slightly, dangerous air that a Rangers, you're a wee bit scared about what he might do or say, which I quite like in a Rangers manager. So I'd quite like to see him. Between Ancelotti and Gerrard, I don't know the future, but if I had to bet, I'll always do this thing where when I'm havering about something, I go, if you had to bet the mortgage and if you're wrong, you're homeless. If I had to bet the mortgage, I'd be betting on Gerrard, subject to what Stevie's saying about getting the right backroom staff in with him. So that would be, and to answer your question about what I'm expecting about next season, I don't know. Like, I take your point about we want to take it to the wire. We want to take it to the last day. I'm hoping for that. I mean, the one thing about Scottish football, you can seem to be miles behind, but if you start catching the breaks and getting the momentum like we did in 55, or like last season, arguably, we start playing at Hampden and before you know it, we're kind of like, we already look like a sort of like a bin fire in progress. I think in Scottish football, you can pick up momentum, but if I was to flip it around and say to you, if we were in Celtic's position, we've just won, the fourth title in a row or whatever it is. We've got like a squad together. We're looking at the opposition in disarray, 17 points behind, a takeover. They haven't even got a manager. They haven't started recruiting yet. If that was us looking at Celtic in the same position, we would not be expecting them to be anywhere near us next season. And I'm not saying we can't do it, but I think for us to do it, a lot of things are going to have to go right very quickly. Thelwell, I believe, is already on it. He looks like a guy who's got a plan. He looks like he knows who's going to be identified if the manager is the right manager. But a lot of things will have to line up, I think, for us to challenge next season. What I'd like to see us do is get all those ducks in a row so that if things start falling our way, if Celtic have a couple of bad results and we go into the first Old Firm game and they haven't won an Old Firm game in 4 or 5 and we win it, suddenly we're 5 points up. The pressure builds. And if there's one thing that I wish for almost more than anything next season is to see Brendan Rodgers under pressure, because we saw in the 55 season, Celtic as a club, their management structure, their players are not used to being under pressure. And as soon as it's applied, like, you can get very surprising results. So what looks like a solid tube can crack in no time. Not that I'm implying Brendan Rodgers is a solid tube. Asterisk, I kind of am. But yeah, I'd love to see him under pressure. That's what I'd like. I'd like to see us get close, and I think if we do get close, it could get interesting. But I think a lot of things have to get lined up pretty quickly.
I think you're right. I think you've kind of summed it all up, potentially spot on, to be honest with you, Billy, I think. But the very least next season, we need to put them under pressure. They need to know we're there. It can't be we beat them at Ibrox in January and go within 7 points and then go and get beat off St Mirren the following week. I was at Not Another Rangers podcast did a charity night last Friday in Oswald's. As soon as I took a mic, I was like, we need to start treating these teams with disdain again. The same way that they're treating us this season. They're coming to Ibrox for a transfer window show off. Like, I've played well at Ibrox, so I've scored 2 goals, so my agent's going to go and get me a move in the summer because I'm looking better than what I actually am. So Rangers need to get back to that kind of, without talking out of turn, no shit, no respect, like towing the line a wee bit. Do you know, in terms of managerial search, right? I know you don't agree with Gerrard, but the whole point of the pod tonight is about, was touched upon Scottish talent, experience of the league. You could even look at it like some Majowski and Sima. Majowski's not kicked a ball for Girona all season. You could go out and buy him with a transfer kit we're going to have. Sima's going back to Brighton. I'm trying to think how I'm going to word this question. So, would you want Ancelotti in charge, knowing that he doesn't know the league? He could get a couple of centre backs that don't know that they're going to get an elbow in the throat and get half weight until the 9th time they do it. When the ball crosses the line, you're not going to score a goal. That's the joys of Scottish football. Like, or do you want Gerrard back, who's going to immediately knows what kind of squad he's got to build. Like, where you at with the whole managerial front and your expectations for next season?
Can you hear me all right? It sounds it's the first time I ever did this on my phone, so I was unsure if the mic was going to be of any good for this. So I'm kind of like on the prevalence that Ancelotti is, if he does come in, that he is going to sign the right players. And what I mean by that is that he's won Champions Leagues at the biggest club in the world. The demands at that club are exactly the same as ours. A draw is a catastrophe, you know. So he comes from a background of having to win every game, set the team up to win every game, to have the right players, although on a far higher scale than at Ibrox. But the point I'm making is, I do believe that with Coppin already there, and I'm optimistic and hopeful that he is more knowledgeable now, knows what's needed in the league. Thelwell's coming in, and I believe that he is in the job because he's ticked the right boxes for our sporting director. So with that infrastructure already there and stuff, I do believe that they can provide the right guidance for Ancelotti. I don't necessarily think that he will be signing players to pass the ball about, because one thing I've picked up on, even from the interview that you did with that Potter, is, and more stuff that I'm reading and learning about Ancelotti, is that he's very adaptable, and so I'm taking that from in a sense that he's going to be able to get players in that's going to be able to adapt to the Scottish game. That's where I'm at with it.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Well,
Can I come back to Billy just really quickly, Scott?
I go for it, Steve. Aye.
Just one really quick thing. See, apparently Thelwell wanted Ancelotti Jr. to take over at Everton when Carlo Ancelotti left Everton. This was a few years ago, so he was even younger then. That's how highly he rated him.
That
So
is
I think
interesting. I didn't know that.
Even then, he knew this guy was a talent, and it's a Premier League club. So, I still think he's the one. I hope so anyway. And it is a huge gamble. You're totally right, by the way. It's an enormous gamble of not being a number one before. But so was Souness, so was Water, so was Gerrard. They had never been number ones before. I know
But they had been leaders.
but-
That's the only thing I would say, is they had been the man. Interesting though, I didn't know that about the Thelwell link. So that does make you wonder what's coming next week.
And also, I think he got Seville wanted him to be their manager last summer as well. So Seville are obviously quite a big club, and must have been doing something right for a big club like that to
Ask.
want him as their manager.
So you go, Barry.
No, I was just going to say, I don't doubt he's got attributes. It's just that managers come to Scotland and they always think it's going to be easier than it is. It took Gerrard and Beale 2 seasons to really work out how to break teams down on a regular basis. So I know he's adaptable, but in a lot of ways, Scottish football is the Stone Age. Like I hate watching some Rangers games because I like watching Rangers, but watching teams with no ambition, sticking 11 men behind the ball and currently knowing that that's all they need to do, and we'll drop a clanger at some point, it's eye bleeding. So I think a lot of managers come in thinking, they'll be defensive, but they'll open up, not factoring in that a lot of Scottish teams just won't open up. They'll go a goal down and they still won't open up because they think they can nick a draw. So that's my concern. And what you guys are saying about Ancelotti does make me more excited about him as a possibility. But I've still got that nagging fear that Scottish football, it has undone more experienced managers than Ancelotti. That would be my worry.
100%. I think he's all right in everything you're saying, but I'm fully on the Stevie G bandwagon. I'm riding that horse until anything else is Wait, you see Russell Martin will come in as a
Don't.
You never know. Weird things have happened. But what I would say is, like, my opinion is that I wouldn't believe everything that's coming out via the main channels. I'm not going to name them, but the people the club speak to, I wouldn't believe everything. I would read between the lines a wee bit, if that makes any sense. Like, I do think there's a preferred candidate, and I do think that Gerrard will be back. That's just my opinion. It's not in. I'm not in the know. I've not heard nothing, but I don't know.
I think Gerrard ticks so many boxes for the US owners. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I reckon if you polled the Rangers support, I think it's about 75% against him coming back. I
don't think it is, Stevie.
Think so?
Stevie, I personally think that if Gerrard comes back and wins you 2 in a row, and he goes back down south, then we're in a position to announce a project coach on Ancelotti. That's when you go that. It's better to build for a winning position than build for the 20 points behind like where we are now.
Yeah, I'd like to think if he is coming back, he's here for 3 or 4 years. He's like, right, I left the last time when I probably shouldn't have. You know, if he'd stayed, he probably would have won 56. I think might not got to the European final, but I think he's, here for the long haul.
I'm just wondering if we could do a live vote, just ask people, because like someone's chipped in, Rob Hawes chipped in with please not Gerrard. Just wondering if everyone can just hit their Gerrard or Ancelotti and see what pops up just now.
Talk about something else for 2 minutes and I'll put my poll up. Somebody take hosting for 2 seconds. Dean, what's the weather like up your way?
In the Scotchio again. Brilliant.
That's informative. That's what I was needing.
So we didn't actually really discuss Shankland about Scottish players. Is Shankland a player that we should be all going after?
That's a good question, aye. Stevie, you go first.
100%. Absolutely. Definitely. I'll go pick him up there now. I think he's a shoo-in to come to Ibrox in the summer. Free transfer, relatively low wages. He's going to get you 20 goals. So perfect player for me.
Right, so on that, going into the summer, you've got Shankland, Igaman, Danilo. Say Dessers leaves, right? So you've got Shankland, Danilo, Igaman. Is that good enough to go on and win the league?
No, I don't think so. But to me, mate, I would keep Igaman, and obviously Shankland comes in, and I would sell Dessers and Danilo. I would get them going, get a decent bit of coin in for the two of them, and the new gaffer's obviously going to have his own targets, and then maybe add 2 more. I want to see 4 centre forwards. I think we need that variation. If we're playing obviously domestically and in Europe, we're going to need a big squad. Squad's not big enough. I mean, the squad's quite big just now, but there's a real lack of quality. So yeah, I want 4 quality centre forwards. So yeah, Shankland, Igaman, and 2 new guys. That to me makes perfect sense.
What about you, Billy? Same questions.
Controversially, I'd be keeping Dessers. I think if you come in to look at Rangers just now, the guy who's got you 50 goals in 2 years is not the guy I'd be showing the door. Danilo, yeah, I think the guy's been unlucky. He got that horrible facial injury, being brave, scoring a goal. But sometimes it just doesn't work out at a club. So Danilo, I don't think we'll get our money back on him. I don't think we'll get anything back looking at the last couple of years. Dessers I'd keep. Igaman I'd want to hold on to for another year because he just looks like he's got so much development potential. Shankland, like I'm a member of the Swedish RSC, and there's a guy on there I talked to a lot who talks sense. He does talk sense. He swore blind he had a contact at Hearts that Shankland was signing in the summer, and he went live on the RSC page and he was like, "You can all call me out if this doesn't happen in the next week." Of course, it was like dead air and tumbleweed after that. To me, I like Shankland, but how many goals has he scored this season? What are his figures? Because to me, he had that purple patch about a year ago, and then it looks like he looks like a player who has gone back a wee bit.
On that, Billy,
Sorry.
90% of the season, maybe even more, he's played in the number 10 role. He's actually played a lot deeper. So he played out of position. I think that's obviously had an impact on his goals to game ratio. And then I think he got put up front and then scored. So I do understand that that's a bit of a fear, a bit of fear in there, isn't there? If he came to Rangers, is he going to replicate the season that he's just had, or is he going to reciprocate the season that he had when he scored?
Three things on Shankland. Hearts have been crap this season. 2 managers, dreadful. Played in Euros last summer, never got a break. I forget the third. I got about 4 hours sleep last night, but he's going to be a good signing for Rangers.
I like him as a player.
Sorry, I remember. Do you know what it is? We were talking before about mentality and leadership. He fits that mould. To me, he's a Rangers player.
I wouldn't argue with that. I like the material he's made of. So if you're asking me, do I like Lawrence Shankland? Would I like him in the squad? Yeah. My worry is that he's in decline. That's my worry. Is he playing the number 10 because he's maybe lost a wee bit? Or is he playing the number 10 just through circumstances? And to Curry, who was saying that, like, if I'm assuming he says if Dessers stay, he'll end up with an napper like me. This is a fashion choice. It's a fashion choice that nature's foisted on me, but it's also a fashion choice. So have that, Curry.
See Dessers, by the way. I think comparing Dessers with Shankland, see the League Cup final, Shankland would have been the first name to take a penalty, and Dessers never. I know he scored 50 goals in 2 seasons.
Yep.
He scored any goals in important games. I know he scored goals in Europe, but domestically, I know we've not been a great team. But to me, it disappears when it really matters.
I think that's true within games, but I think it would be harsh to question Dessers' character. That guy has had, for a guy who's had so much grief and been a lightning rod for the support, he's kept turning up. He doesn't feign injury. He gets his goals. I don't think we win the league with him as our number 1 choice, but I'd be loath to ship 50 goals without a very good idea where they're coming from next season.
So far, I have got the poll's been up for 2 minutes. We've got 62% Gerrard, 32% Ancelotti. Now, I'm letting that run for another 2 minutes. Now I'm going to shut up shop, folks. So get your votes in.
So about 10 minutes after that vote finishes, some aggregator site will be saying Gerrard's officially confirmed by the Rangers Journal.
Well, it's funny. Was it Guillem Balague? Is that his name? The Spanish reporter? When we were doing the manager
series. Balague or something like that.
Aye, that's the one. When we were looking for the manager series, when Jose was linked, we were... Billy Rankin for the pod actually messaged him on Twitter, and I get back saying, I'll be up for an interview on Jose middle of May, no bother. No, middle of May it was. Billy messaged him again and he says, I can't come on because I'm too busy. And then he puts up a poll yesterday on Twitter saying, who do Rangers fans want, Ancelotti or Gerrard? So we nearly had the guy on the pod for manager series on Jose Mourinho, which would have been brilliant. But you're looking at 57% Gerrard now, 43% Ancelotti.
Gerrard's a pragmatic choice. He is. He's won the most important title of our lifetimes. He's done it. I don't see when people say it was a COVID season. I don't care about that. Everybody had to play in the same conditions, and they excelled. They were unbeaten. So it does make so much sense.
See if it was Gerrard or Knutson, I'm on a Knutson bandwagon. See if it's Gerrard or anybody with any kind of experience or pedigree or that makes you a brand up Muscat. I want Muscat over Gerrard, but because of the 2 choices I've got, I'm choosing Gerrard. It's a hill I'm living on, and I'll die by it if that makes any sense. Like,
I think it's close. I think it is really close between them because, the Americans are going to look at Gerrard and think, he knows it. But then Ancelotti also fits their profile. Look at Leeds. But I don't know.
57-43 it's finished on. But anyway, gents, I'll come round on you for any closing thoughts before we wrap up. Stevie, thanks for coming on, mate. Any closing thoughts?
No, thanks very much for having me. Thanks to everybody for contributing. It's been really good.
It's been a good chat. Billy, thanks for coming on, mate. Nice to finally do a pod with you. Any closing thoughts?
No, just thanks. This has been fun. And actually, like, I used to work in recruitment, and maybe we're kind of roundabout way. We're actually touching on the important thing here, which is that vote's coming in at about 55-45. I've got my preference, but Stevie and Dino have kind of convinced me that the second option's pretty good. And maybe that's what Rangers are doing. Actually, for once, maybe we're being kind of professional, and we've got two candidates who are both good. And if one of them falls through, there's not that much of a fall off to the other candidate. So maybe we're actually doing this right.
Aye, exactly. Just to answer this, I'm going to bite on this, right? So, Juninho Bacuna was sold for a profit. Eros Grezda was a failed signing on Gerrard's behalf, yes. Umar Sadiq was a loan signing. Polster,
That's him.
Better. Jake Hasty was a free transfer. I'm assuming Leon King, he's a youth product. Ejaria, loan signing. Ojo was a loan signing. Simpson, free transfer. Worrell, loan signing. Canberra, loan signing. Macaulay, free transfer. Zungu, loan signing. Barker, free transfer. Itten, £1.5 million. Edmondson, 500k. Helander, £2.5 million, etc. So come back at me with that, pal. Gerrard's transfer, he spent 30 million over 3 seasons, and we've got 30 million to spend in 1 season. So thanks for your contribution. Dino, any to add?
Nah, mate. All good. Been a pleasure and privilege as always.
I think we've got your specialist subject in mastermind, Scotty. Like the Gerrard era.
100%. He was my favourite.
Quicker than Google.
Aye. Andy King was a loan signing as well. Didn't kick his own arse when he was here. So yes, you are right. Gerrard wasn't good at loaning players. Well played. Anyway, thank you for subscribing to the channel, everybody. We've been sponsored by offtothematchigo.co.uk tonight. Get on the website, apply the code Journal10, you will get your 10% discount. We've also got a competition on the go just now. You'll see it on all our socials, which is a brand new free home top or a signed picture from Willie Johnson or Colin Steen. You'll win either or if you like and subscribe. It's on the community page on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook and Twitter. Apart from that, remember, no surrender, and every night is a Rangers Journal night. Cheers.